In Sculpture Effects has this icon, and this is probably a beta thing that's going to change. I don't know. But in painting, this is actually the frame by frame, and this tab over here is the effects. But once you get into that tab, actually there is one difference between them. The painting has the hand-drawn animation, and the sculpture doesn't have that option. But aside from that, we have all the same options, and this is another thing that you won't see this if you're not in play mode. If you're paused and your scene isn't running, you're not going to see these effects really happen. These are all different effects that you can play with, and I won't spend a lot of time going over those. They're mostly the same between the two. You might not see a lot on the sculpture unless you might have to turn up the looseness a bit to really see those effects, or you might need a more complex sculpture. Oops. Here we can see, now if we turn up the boil. So with a sculpture, you need to be able to see the flex to see the effects. On a painting, you always see the flex. With a sculpture, if it's really smooth, you're not really going to get much of these effects. And especially if you have a sculpture that's got like a chrome finish or something, you might not really even see the boil effect. So the last thing that we have in our chart to look at are the physical properties, which are very different between the two. A sculpture, it's by default it's collidable. You can turn that off. By default, it is not movable. If I make that movable, see how it just drops out of the frame?
Oh yeah.
And then we'll back up and make it not movable. Usually, you would leave things unmovable unless you want something to have falling physics or something like that. So by default, it stays that way.
Quick question.
Yes.
Let's see. Can you go back to what was the bottom one, two down from there? Collidable.
Collidable, yeah.
So toggling collidability
yes.
doesn't affect necessarily your thermometers?
No, it doesn't have any effect on your thermometers as far as I've seen. And it's also really important to know that when you turn something on to, it's collidable by default. I can still clone this and I can overlap it with something else in assembly mode. And that is fine. It's in play mode. When you're actually playing the level, that's when collidability affects it. So if you have something that's movable and it drops, it will hit these things that are collidable and your character will collide with it. But this is not like some other traditional 3D modeling software that we may have used in the past, where you're going to have a real problem because of overlapping shapes. You don't have to worry about overlapping shapes. You can overlap it, and we can make a whole bunch of clones the way that we always see people do on the streams. Yes. And they're all overlapping, and that's okay. And we're just going to get rid of those right now because we don't need them. But collidable is only in reference to the way that things interact in play mode. It really doesn't affect the game engine itself.
That's nice.
Some other things that you can play with are things like friction. That will affect how movable objects interact with each other and how a character can interact with objects. That's a little more advanced. But these are just things to know about. Bounciness and squashiness. If you have a movable thing that's like a ball, for example, and it drops down and hits a hard surface, it can bounce and squash. Also a little bit more advanced. But something that we'll look at really quickly here in painting is the ability to make something physical. When you make it physical, these other tabs light up, and so now you have floppiness and you have wind strength. This is, again, something that you're not going to see unless you're you have your scene running in play mode. Now let's turn up the wind strength a little bit here, and you see how, let's close, oops, I'll close that so that we can see more of this. I can change the direction of the wind strength with this arrow if I want to. Oops, I selected. Wow. I can grab this and move the direction of the wind strength. You can change the wind flap rate, make it really strong, make it really floppy. So this is how you make things that have a fabric-y type of a quality.
Or like locks of hair.
Or locks of hair. It's really good for foliage, for hair, for fabric.
Right.
Paintings can be floppy and have a wind physics, but they don't have physical collision, and it's the opposite for sculptures. There's also an option to say it's attached at both ends, and so now it's just gone back to where my original endpoint was, and it's saying it's attached at both ends.
Can you turn the wind off so we can see it fall back into position?
Yeah, I'll turn the wind strength all the way back down.
It goes back.
But now it's totally floppy also, so if well, actually no, it's gone.
But it's
gone
the
back.
original shape. That's
Yeah.
the original brush stroke. Floppiness doesn't change anything
When there's no wind.
Like exactly.
Yeah.
Any type of inertia. That's probably not.
So if I turn that, sorry, if I turn that all the way up and then I adjust the wind direction, now you can see it getting.
Can you have multiple points of wind?
No, there's just
Really
one,
makes sense.
just one wind direction.
Okay.
Wind ripple. These are the basic differences. We'll just do sort of a quick little recap. Physical properties, physical collision, no physical collision, but wind collision, or sorry, physical wind. It doesn't provide any shadows, and the sculpture will provide shadows. So yeah, let's call that quits for today, and we'll do another tutorial where we work on how to sort of use these two in combination, how to make your paintings more sculptural, how to make your sculptures more painterly, and how the two interact, and we'll also talk about thermometer optimization. We did thermometer optimization for sculptures and using the sculptured detail tool.
Right.
That's really handy for sculptures. It doesn't do anything for paintings, so there's no detail reduction on a painting.
That's very interesting.
And we will talk about how to make an optimized painting, but it is something that you have to do a little bit more in the process while you're painting and not so much after the fact. It's pretty easy to optimize a sculpture after the fact, but there are still some things that you can do, some practices you can adopt to optimize your thermometer as you're going and have less sort of reworking after the fact to do.
Right.
But that will be separate in-depth tutorials on the two tools.
Nice.
So that was fun and hopefully not too long. And we'll have question and answers available on dreamsource.com in a special form.